Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. I'm going for the Liberace look at the moment. I just can't do anything with my hair. It's just all over the place. Today we have an ugly duckling project. We have this really bland piece of fabric, nothing really special about it, and it tends to sit on the shelf for years on end with nobody wanting to look at it or sew it. But I've decided today that I want to do a project using some fabric that's mostly uninspiring and turn it into something a little bit nicer. So we're making a bag. No surprises there, hey? So this is the bag, but that's the back of the bag. On the front, we've done this with it. So it's turned a really boring looking bag into something much nicer. That's our project today. It's really simple. There's no zips, so there's no stress. And yeah, it won't take too long either. Let's get straight to it. Okay, these are the things we're going to need today. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to use ribbon or cord, so one of those will be used. I need some fabric to make my little keepers or the tabs. I need a magnetic closure. That's the only piece of hardware we're putting into this bag today. There's no zips or D-rings or anything. This is a scrap piece of fabric left over from the lining. It's not as deep as I'd like it to be, but I'm going to turn this into a pocket. And the instructions that I give you for cutting out the fabric will actually be bigger than what this is, but I need to use that up. I've got some webbing which I'm going to be using for my handles. I've got Parlan, which is what I like to use as my stabilizer. It's an iron-on or a soft iron-on stabilizer. And then I have my ugly piece of fabric, and I have my lining. So this pocket here is the excess from this lining piece. I've accidentally cut my lining at the same size as the fabric, but that's not how big it's going to be. So we won't know the size of our lining pieces or our stabilizer just yet. But I will have all of the correct details when I put them on the list. The first thing we want to do is take our fabric that we're going to use for the tabs. And I've just cut one long strip, and I've folded the fabric in half. Then I've folded the raw edges into the centre and folded that in again and pressed that really well. Once you've done that, take it to the machine and stitch down both long edges. And so that we don't just go to the machine for that alone, we might as well take this pocket, and this is the wrong side of the fabric. So we want the wrong side facing out. Fold that in half lengthwise. I'm going to sew along here, up here, along there, and back along here as well. And I'll leave an opening just in the centre on one of these sides. So we'll do that, and we'll do the fabric for the tab. So we'll start off with this one first, and I've got the fold at the top here. We're going to sew part way down this side. Leave a big enough opening for turning through. And we'll sew along here and across there. Whilst I'm at the machine, I might as well trim my corners, and we can turn this the right way out, and we'll be able to top stitch the edge that doesn't have the opening. I'll find the opening and turn this through, and once you've poked out all your corners and pressed your edges down so that it's nice and neat, we can top stitch the top edge. And we can set that aside to put into the lining later. Alright, I've changed my thread. The black fabric is ready to go. Okay, the pocket's done. I've clipped the open edges together at the bottom there. We'll stitch this onto the lining shortly. I've also cut my tabs. So this was a strip that we've just sewn down both long edges. I've cut 8 2-inch strips or tabs out of that. So we've got 8 of those. It's 2 inches or 5 centimetres. And we're going to start putting these onto our fabric. So what we're going to do, from one short edge of our fabric, we're going to measure 6 inches or 15 centimetres from the top, make a mark right across, and then we're going to make another mark 3.5 inches or 9 centimetres from the top edge. And we can mark that line all the way across. And then you need to measure the width of your fabric. This one is 12 inches, and we need to put 4 tabs evenly across the top and across the bottom. Next, we're going to find the centre of the fabric by folding this in half, and we'll mark a line in the middle there. So that'll be 6 inches from the outside edge on both sides. From that centre marking, we're going to measure 1 inch on either side, which is 2.5 centimetres. And from here on, we're going to ignore that centre marking. So we've got that 1 inch mark from the centre. We'll mark an equal position on the opposite side. And with the other 1 inch mark from the centre, we'll mark another position. I've got to find something that you can see better. Okay, so hopefully you can see these yellow lines along here. I've got a yellow marker here, and another one here and here. And this is the centre of our fabric. We're now going to take our measurements from these yellow markers, and the next measurement out, we want 2 inches or 5 centimetres. And on this line, we'll make the same mark. And from this side again. So if you can see these yellow markers, we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4. And then we have the line going straight down here and here. Now we can grab these little tabs and we'll fold them in half. And you want to make sure these tabs are all really even in length. And we're going to place the tab on that mark that we've made. And they're a bit of a pain to keep in place, so you can use a pin or you can use double-sided tape. And I find that these pins bend too easily, and I've already pricked myself a few times today. So you can use a pin if you want to, or you can use some double-sided tape. And I think that's what I'm going to do to keep everything in place. And it'll also help me with my fold of the fabric when I do that. And another one here. This is a double-sided tape that you can sew over so you won't get gummy needles. Now I can fold these in half and place that directly over the top. Doesn't matter that they're opening up at the moment. And what I want to do here is fold the fabric over on that line. You'll feel the lump in the fabric underneath. Pop a clip in place just to hold it there, that's that side done. And we're going to do the same on this side. So we'll fold our pieces in half. And line them up in line with the other tab. You can make it easier to find your position for the fold just by popping a pin in the end here. And folding the fabric over. All right, once you've clipped all of those in place, we can now take this to the machine and stitch it in place. So you can just double check that you have 2 inches apart inside here. And if that's all right, then we can go and stitch down here. And we'll stitch down here. Once you've done that, we'll open it out and we'll top stitch along here and here. It's a good thing I double checked my distances because I hadn't actually positioned them equally apart. So they need to be 2 inches apart in between these gaps here. From the outside edge, it will be roughly 2 inches or a little bit more. And when you mark these lines, those yellow lines that I've marked, you can go and crease the fabric then, fold it over, give it a press, and then you've got a good crease mark. You don't have to do things the hard way like I've done here. Would have been much easier for me just to go and iron that, have a crease set, and then mark the rest of the fabric out. Now I will sew that up. So my seam allowance here is going to be determined by the width of my presser foot here. So it's probably just about 1/4 of an inch. As long as I catch the tabs underneath, that'll be all I need. I don't want to do more than 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre. And I can do the same with the next row. And with that done, I can open out the fabric, leaving this folded edge to my right. I'm going to place this fabric over the top of it. So you've got the seam underneath, or that fold. And I'm going to top stitch right along the edge there. So that's flattened that one out nicely and secured that in place underneath. I'll do the same for this one. So this seam here, or the fold, wants to go away from the centre. So this time around it's going to my left, under there. It's at this point I can finally measure how much fabric I need for my lining and for my stabiliser. So I started off with 12 inches in width, which I still have, and the length of the fabric was 20.5 inches, but now it's 19 inches in length, which is 48 centimetres. So that means I'm going to cut my lining at 48 by 30 centimetres and my stabiliser as well. And I'll quickly do those now. Okay, I've cut my lining and my stabiliser to size. I'll place the stabiliser on the wrong side of my bag fabric and I'll take that to the heat press and iron it. With the lining, this is the right side and that's the wrong side. I'll fold this in half and mark a crease at each end. And on the wrong side of the fabric, I'm going to get a couple of scraps of stabiliser. These are about 2 by 1.5 inches. I'm placing that over the centre at the top there, and I'll do the same on this side. This is for the magnetic snaps when we put those on later. It gives a little bit of reinforcement to the fabric, and when you open and close the bag, it's not going to tear the fabric. I'll iron those and this one here as well. Okay, I've fused my stabilizer, the lining, and I've also ironed my pocket. Let's take our lining fabric, and our pocket needs to go somewhere along here. I'm going to position mine 3.5 inches from the top, right after I've marked the centre of both fabric pieces. I've got the centre here and the centre of my pocket, and we want to measure 3.5 inches or 9 centimetres from the top. We can pin that in place and stitch that. And now what we can do with this is put our cord on. So I've grabbed a length of cord and I've just wound some adhesive tape around the end of this. I've grabbed a bodkin, and you want something that's going to fit through these loops. So a safety pin may not work unless it's small enough. If you want tape around the cord tight enough and have it like a shoelace aglet, you'll be able to feed that through on its own. Starting at one end, feed your bodkin through on the top, then go to the second one on the bottom, then the third one at the top, and the fourth one at the bottom. And then you can start feeding the cord through the top loop at the other end. And at the other end you want to leave about 2 inches overhang. And then feed the rest of the cord through the remaining tabs that don't already have cord through it. And then just pull this cord so that it sits nice and flat across the centre. And on the outside edge we're going to cross them over. And we'll pop a clip in the edge there, and we'll sew over that a couple of times. And on this side we'll do the same. We'll cross the cord over and pop the clip in on that side as well. So now we can go and sew the pocket and those two ends in place. Now my seam allowance for this bag is going to be 1 centimetre, so to attach this cord at the end I'm going to make that a lot less, so probably maybe about 1/4 inch or so, or 1/2 centimetre. And the same for the other side. So that's made a nice decorative feature of the front of the bag. And now we can sew the pocket down. And I'm closing up the opening at the bottom of the pocket as well. And because this pocket is a little bit wide, I'm going to sew an extra 2 channels, one at each end of the pocket. And they're only about 1 inch away from the outside edge of that pocket. They'll be a good place to put pens. So with the pocket sewn in and that decorative cord on the front of our bag, we can now attach our handles. We can get rid of this excess cord, we don't need that anymore. It's made a huge difference to the look of the fabric now, hasn't it? Let's find the centre of our fabric. We'll mark that with a pin, and I have the webbing for my handles. You can make your own cord with any spare fabric. It would look really nice with handles made out of the same cord, so you could braid 3 pieces of cord together for each handle, and I think that would look really nice too. But my plan initially was to match the black webbing to the black tabs, so I've got to stick with it. I also couldn't be bothered braiding any cord. So with the pin marked in the centre of my bag, I'm going to place my webbing 2.5 inches or 6 centimetres from the centre, and on the other side you'll also place those handles 2.5 inches or 6 centimetres from the centre. And I just want to make sure that those handles are lined up on both sides. And once you're happy with that, you can stitch them in place right away, but I'm going to set this aside for a moment. Grab our lining, And we're going to put our magnetic closure on. If you don't have magnetic closures, you can use Velcro, or you can just leave it with nothing, or you could even make a little flap to fold over the front of the bag. Measuring from the wrong side of the fabric where the stabiliser is, I'm going to mark where I'd like my magnet to be, and I've got to keep in mind my seam allowance at the top plus room to top stitch. So here I've made a mark at 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres, but I discover later that that's just not far enough away from the top edge. So instead you can go and mark this at 1.5 inches or 4 centimetres from the edge. Fold that in half and find the centre again. And I'm going to place the washer over the centre marking and just mark those little slots on the side of that washer. And on the other side of the bag we'll do the same. Measure 1.5 inches or 4 centimetres from the top. Mark the centre and then mark the slicing positions. Using the point of your seam ripper, poke that in through the bottom of that mark that you've made. So you can see the point of the seam ripper sticking out there. Don't start slicing. Bring the point of that seam ripper in at the top of the mark that you've made and give it a push. And then you've made a hole for one of the prongs on the magnet. Do the same on this side. Push the seam ripper in, poke it through the top and give it a push. Then we can grab one end of our magnet and pop it through those holes that we've made, and that slides through nice and easy. Place the washer over the top and spread those prongs apart, and repeat for the other side. And that magnet comes through from the right side of the fabric, so you want to see that when it's inside the bag. Now some people do like to put an extra piece of stabiliser over the top of the magnet, and that will prevent the fabric or the magnet from rubbing against the exterior fabric and causing the fabric to wear away and get holes in them. So you can either iron it on or just use some double-sided tape to stick it down. It'll be stitched along the top edge as well. You don't have to do this, but some people do prefer to have that little bit of added protection against their exterior fabric. So now we can start putting everything together. We've got our lining with the right side faced up. We'll take the corded side of the bag and we'll place that to the opposite side of the pocket, and we'll line that up with the right sides facing. Line up the top edge, and remember we haven't sewn our handles in place yet, so you want to be careful with those. And double check that your handles are sitting nice and straight under there between those layers. And we'll repeat for the other side. And now we're ready to sew this up. I'm going to sew right along these two short edges here. Where the positions are for the handles, I'm going to triple stitch over the webbing on both of those at each end. My seam allowance is going to be 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch. When I stitch over the handles, I'll be going forward, back and forward. And we can do the same on the other side. Let's separate the outer fabric from the lining, and we'll line up those seams on the side there. And we'll clip those edges together along the side. Repeat for this side. Now we can sew from here all the way down this end and from this side all the way down as well. I'm going to leave an opening of about my hand's width on this side here. So I'll stop with a back stitch up there, come down here a bit, back stitch again, and sew to the end. And on the other side I can sew all the way down. Now I did have a needle breakage when I got to the cord. I don't think it was because of the cord, I think it's because of the lining fabric I'm using. It's horrible stuff. So I'm going to go really slow where the cord is. So I've never had thread breakages just from using cord, but I have had loads of thread breakages from using this furnishing fabric. It's a curtaining fabric and it's very synthetic. I don't know what causes the fabric or the needle to break, but I certainly don't think it's the cord. Anyway, I've finished. We want to box some corners now, and I only want very small box corners for this one. I don't think this bag needs to be really deep across the bottom. So where the stitching line is where I take my measurements from, and that will give me a nice perfect square. So I'm measuring 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres from the stitching line out, and 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres from the folded edge. Do the same over this side. We're taking the measurement from the stitching line and the folded edge. We can flip that over. And for the lining we'll do the same. There's my stitching line. Now we can take our outer fabric and spread the front and back apart, and this box corner will spread out and become one long line. So we've got the line coming around the corner here, pinch that and that. Pop a clip in there just to hold that in place. We'll do the same on this side. You could just as easily have cut out your box corners if you wanted to, but it would mean reinforcing your seam where you have to cut the fabric out, and I'm too lazy for that. We'll repeat for the lining. Pinch that out and that corner. And you can take this to the machine now and sew over that solid line, just sew straight across on all 4 corners if you want to now. I'm going to speed up the process, and instead I'm going to take this seam and this seam and bring them together. So all it is this seam here, this ear and this ear are going to come and face each other. Whoops. So it doesn't matter whether you bring this into the middle here and just try and have these 2 sides kissing each other. So we're still going to sew over this long edge here, which will sew over that long edge at the same time. Because we're sewing all those layers together, I will double stitch that. And for the other side of the bag, we'll bring those side seams together as well. So we want those two side seams facing each other. And you'll match up the line that you've marked on both of those pieces of fabric. As I said, you don't have to do this. You can sew each one individually and then you'll be finished. The reason we're doing this at the same time is to save time, but also so that we can have our fabric pieces joined at the bottom and the inside will never come out. So we can sew across there twice and this one. If you've never sewn your corners together with the lining and the outer fabric at the same time, I probably recommend that you do them separately just so that you can get the hang of how the corners work. And once you've got used to that, you can always go and sew the two pieces together later on. And I'll do that one more time. And repeat for this side. Okay, we can trim off those little ears there. And we can find the opening and turn the bag the right way out. And then with the opening along the side here, we can just pinch those edges closed, fold the edges together, and we can stitch that closed. Now, because we've got the lining and the outer fabric sewn together, we can pull on them and the lining will never be separated from the outer fabric. Leaving the bag inside out, we can line up the top edges. Okay, we can finish this up, sew up the side and top stitch around this top edge, and then we're done. And now to top stitch. I'm starting near the seam on the side. And I'm coming up to the magnet here. I probably should have changed my foot to my zipper foot because it's a lot narrower. I may still have to do that. We'll find out. Yep, I need to put my narrow foot on. If you want to avoid that problem, then when you put the magnet on, move it down to 1.5 inches from the top rather than the 1 inch that I've chosen to do. And we're done. Okay, that's all completely finished. Let's turn this the right way out and see how this ugly duckling has turned out. So even though we only have a small 1 inch boxed corner, we've actually got a good amount of space in the bag. It opens up nice and wide, magnetic closure at the top there. You can put a zip in if you prefer to, but it wasn't what I wanted to do today. This is how the bag would look if you hadn't gone and put anything on the front of it. And that's it now. Kind of cute, isn't it? I really like how this has turned out. It's a very cute little bag. Not something that I plan on doing for the shop. I do have loads of these pieces of fabric that are very plain, but they lend themselves to really good boxy bags for guys. They tend to like them fairly plain. But yeah, us ladies, we like something a little bit more decorative or brighter. This is one way to brighten up a dull looking piece of fabric. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.